Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation workshop brought to you by Otoy and Render Network. I'm Dino Muhic, I'm your announcer for today. And we have two really cool presentations from two amazing artists here. One is Thanos Kagkalos, aka MotionPunk, and the other is Jill Augustinen, aka Capital TV. They're both amazing artists that have started their career years ago, but they have done it in such a speed and come to a place where their career is on a highly technical level. And I'm happy to let them both explain to you how they reached this state. But first, let me explain to you first what Otoy and the Render Network are. I have to read this out because this sounds like advertising. Well, Otoy is a leading company in the field of cloud graphics and render technology. They provide powerful tools and services that allow creators to generate visual content efficiently, like, for example, Octane Render. The Render Network is a decentralized rendering platform that uses idle GPU power from all around the world, where artists can use it to render their stuff on. Who of you knows Octane or Octane Render? Wow, that's cool. How many do? Okay, fellows. How many of you do know Render Network? Okay, we can improve that. That's good. Okay, now that we cleared that up, Thanos will speak for around 40 to 45 minutes. Then after that, Jill is going to give his presentation, which is also around 40 to 45 minutes. And later after that, you have the possibility for a Q&A where you can ask your questions. And I also urge you to stay around because we also have some nice merchandise for the first questioners. First come, first served. And now, without further ado, big applause for Thanos.
Hi, everyone. I'm Thanos, as you see on the screen behind me. Not the one from the Avengers, obviously. I don't have magic powers or anything. But I'm Thanos Kagkalos. I'm an art director and motion designer based in Athens, Greece for the moment. Probably you know me by my alias that I go online is MotionPunk. And before getting into more things about me, I wanted to show you my bit outdated showreel. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm here today, and I want to thank very much Otoy for trusting me for this. We're gonna discuss about art directing photorealism with Octane Render. Now, this is not very accurate because I usually break photorealism, but having a good base to start with and breaking the rules is always something that every person needs to know. First steps, in order to give some more context to all of this, some first steps, I started 3D around 2003, I think that was. Back in the day, I went to a school in Athens about animation. Motion design wasn't a thing at all back then. It was either you could be a modeler or you could be a character animator. I hated both. I was very bad at both. But, you know, I always had a thing for light and render engines, and which was also something very, very limited back then at the time. On this slide, I have this weird image, and you would be wondering what that is. Well, back then, there were no such things, obviously, as GPU engines or even, I don't know, CPU engines, if you could call CPUs what was back in the day. But we had to use this image, for instance, to create a chrome. So we were faking reflections. We were throwing this image on top of things to show that something is a metal, right? So you understand how primitive this period was and how difficult it was to take advantage of the technological things back then to start creating something that looks remotely photorealistic. So I got very disappointed in 3D because of the difficulties and because of the lack of knowledge. Also, YouTube wasn't a thing back then. Internet was, you know, a crude place at the time. So I stopped 3D altogether for about 10, 12 years. I was doing random things. I was doing graphic design. I was doing whatever to survive. I was liking also a lot, I must admit. I didn't put much effort into things. And I started a little later. Because I love design, I love things, I started with something easier than 3D. I started with After Effects. So I started working a lot in 2D. I started doing a lot of animation, a lot of typographic explorations, a lot of UI stuff that was very trendy at the time. I'm about 32 years old, and this is back in 2012, I think. And here's how my generalist journey began. So I started, again, slowly going a little deeper into 3D because rendering was a little faster these days, and my workflow was, at the time, 3D Studio Max and V-Ray. So 3 years later, I meet a friend of mine, Tony Zagoreos, and we form a studio called Yeti Pictures, where we both come from this heavy 2D background, and we want to do more, though, right? As you see behind me, I have a lot of things from that period of my life, but a lot of them were heavily 2D oriented, and the reason still is because 3D for us was very intimidating. For those that have been using, let's say, V-Ray back in the day, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to say bad things about another piece of software, but it's like when you do not see what you're doing, what you're rendering, what you're designing, what you're lighting, real time in a way, it was way, way difficult. It was way more difficult to design, way more difficult to direct, and in general, there were also a lot of technical things back then about the render engines. You had to understand how sampling works into depth. There were not much resources, and yeah, we were trying, though, slowly to integrate 3D more and more into our pipeline because also clients wanted more 3D stuff on top of everything, and also because we find the 3D world very, very exciting. We wanted to expand camera moves, shading, animations, you know, particles and whatnot. So slowly, we made a lot of projects. We started growing as a studio, having a lot of client work from Greece and from abroad. But we reached to a point where we started having struggles with our workflow, right? And this is a project we did for a company that does milk products in Greece. This is Giannis Antetokounmpo, a very famous NBA player, if you're familiar with. And this project really stretched us thin, let's say. It was a very, very heavy, as you see, 3D project with characters, interiors. It was combining everything to create this film, and it was also a 3-minute, I think, 3.5 minute type of commercial. And we really got to our limits, right? We were not very technical. We were figuring still things out, and although the result looks nice, it's mostly due to, I think, aesthetics and art direction, rather than us having an established and clear pipeline and workflow. And for me, that was the project that I said to myself, I had enough. I love 3D a lot. And in order not to drop out of it again, I need to figure a way to make my life easier and to be able to put my vision into pixels without so much struggle. And right at the time, it was when I discovered Octane Render. I saw my friend Tony one day playing at the office with some, it was just a sphere, right, with some typography around it, and I was like, oh, this looks very, very cool. It had some subsurface scattering and stuff, and I was like, what is this? What is this render engine? Everything looks very, very nice here. And he says it's Octane, it's an experimental, I don't know. This is back in 2015, early 16, I think. He says, I discovered this render engine now, and I was like, okay. So I bought immediately 290, 80 cards at the time. They were very, very expensive. And I immediately fall in love with Octane. Sorry, Maxon. And another reason for falling in love with Octane is when I watched this screen behind the typography is from Raoul Marx. He made some titles for Semi-Permanent back then with an astronaut. That was extremely impressive, and the way the images look and how the light was handled there was for me something that I've never seen before. Because Octane, as a render engine, because it is unbiased versus to a V-Ray that I was using before, unbiased is a technical term to describe, let's say, how accurate a render engine is. So Octane, being unbiased and all, was able to produce very nice and clear images without anti-aliasing, without flickering, let's say, with very, the colors of the light, the self-luminance object, everything was great. And I started leaving the studio work behind and saying, look, I'm going to try my own way. I'm going to try some projects. I'm going to start pushing forward this whole pipeline and see where it leads me. So this brings me to my first ever render that I did with Octane. And you see how nice it could handle SSS and dispersion and all. And of course, I'm joking. I wasn't able to do this back then. This was my first render with Octane. Some typical spheres that forgot to mention also that I completely left 3D Studio Max, and I fell in love with Cinema 4D at the time. And every person that, I guess a lot of you here are using Cinema 4D, every person that starts Cinema 4D and respects themselves just put some sphere in a cloner, put some dynamics, let it play. And but you immediately see how good Octane can handle light and for instance, dispersion in this case, in these glass spheres, right? And the nice depth of field that was on camera and everything. And I was, you know, there was no turning back from me at this point to go to any previous pipeline. So I kept going my own path, and I decided that we really need to consider switching workflow in our studio. So playing around for about a year, it's like we did a lot of commercial work also with Octane, and we realized how easier it is for a single person to start doing lighting and shading real time, without interruptions, without lag, without buckets. Everything became very, very easy. And around 2017, it was September, I think, I started working on this personal project called ManVsMachine. This is a screenshot from this project. And let me show you how this went. Thank you. So, yeah, I really had this bet to myself and with the other team try to make something that it's kind of big production, let's say, in terms of 3D. So I was trying to push Cinema 4D and Octane as much as I could at the time. And as you see, trying some cloner stuff, using mix-up animations, alembics, offsetting keyframes, creating this type of crowds that we really liked. And trying to do any technique possible. As you see here, I was trying to fake waves with deformers and stuff, using heavy SSS shaders, see how these perform as well. And it was also the first time that I was trying to incorporate in my workflow VDBs and fluid simulations like the smoke you see on the bottom, the explosion. Because before, with my previous workflow, even SSS was kind of difficult without Octane. I remember having to do an ice cream commercial in V-Ray, and I was having like dramas. I was like, no, 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 I can't do that. But with Octane, I could immediately do very, very realistic shading. I was very impressed with the quality of the images that it could output. And here I kept pushing, again, more VTBs. I was using a plugin called Turbulence FD. In Cinema 4D at the time, everything was very user-friendly. Dynamics, you also see some real flow on the top. So I tried my best to push everything as hard as possible in order to convince everyone at the studio that, look, this is time for us to start switching to a completely different pipeline. And as you see in the frames behind me, the water, the mountains here, although, as I was saying, I'm not doing much photorealism, but I prefer to use photorealistic aspects to break it into hyper-realism. I was very pleased on how Octane was handling lights, SSS, especially here. This was a very heavy scene at the time to render. Obviously, my VDB game is not very strong here. They're a little low quality. But I was still learning. There were topics that I was able to touch upon that before they were a no-go for me completely. Also here, you see this frame. It has a little bit of glows, a little bit of fog in the back. I was able to add details, as you see in the cable here, that it's a little bit translucent and everything. And I wasn't afraid to play with difficult materials and difficult concepts, because also, I think this project was rendered in 270 cards, and it wasn't honestly that heavy. Because I like, at some point in my life, I was thinking, oh, new cards will come out, I will do faster renderings. Yeah, that doesn't work this way. The more cards I buy, the more things I add in a shot. It's like I'm trying to break my computer from time to time. So here, heavy VDB, I started I started trying to create dust on render, and forgot to mention that throughout this process, I was doing zero post-production at all. These are frames that are straight from the camera, Octane was very good at, with very few sliders, to tweak a little bit of gamma, a little bit of exposure, was handling burnt areas very well, way before ACES. For those who do not know what ACES is, it's the color standard these days for every render engine. It's a sophisticated system where it makes the highlights of your objects look great without much effort. But yes, saving time from compositing, it was also a crucial factor for us to catch up with very tight deadlines and same time have artistic control and have the images looking exactly as we like from camera. Now, again, as I was saying, Cinema 4D and Octane, after this project, became our primary workflow. And we were not a studio of many people, right? It was basically, we were 4 people at the time. So we were doing anything from client handling to art directing to executing. We used a few specialists here and there. And 2 years later, after everything, I decided to keep pushing a little bit Cinema 4D further. Octane, I dived more into simulations. This is something that I really like doing. And I came up with this silly project called Fruitless. And let me show you how that is. Thank you. Thank you. So as you see, clearly my focus starts becoming more and more design-oriented, right? From doing characters, from doing 2D, from doing various things that I wasn't very comfortable with. I start more and more to focus on what I say my niche, right? And I think my strength was to be my strength was like lighting, shading, colors, and having Octane in my arsenal helped me a lot to focus on that rather on spending time on doing, I don't know, debugging, right? Although our job is most of the time still, as I tend to say, 90% debugging, 10% working. But every tool that I find to take this 10% to a little less, it's just a small win every day for me. So there, I wasn't very happy with my life again because the work piled up a lot and the studio wanted to grow, but we were in Greece, we couldn't find a lot of people to join us at the time, and I decided that now that I have established a nice workflow, etc., maybe it's time for me to pursue something else. And from studio owner, I became a freelancer, and eventually I dropped from a generalist doing everything, because at the time I was doing everything, animating, designing, executing, simulating, and it had a kind of heavy toll on me throughout a period of many years with no vacations and all. So I decided to pursue my career as an art director, right? So it's 2020. I am leaving my friend Tony and Yeti Pictures behind. I rebrand myself as MotionPunk, and I decide to pursue a completely different thing. So my first project that I did as a single person was a project called Mamba Out. It was a tribute to Kobe Bryant, to his death. And it gained a lot of attention for some reason, but let me show you and you tell me what you think. Thank you. Thank you. As you see, I'm more again into directing things, a lot more into simulations, particles, always trying to push cinema 4D and find different ways to expand my visual imagery. This project took me to execute about 10 days, from animatic to final rendering. And that's because at the time I started building also myself and what Octane calls a network rendering. So network rendering of Octane is something that is extremely helpful for artists because you can take a lot of computers and without almost any setup, I can just connect my live viewer with all the GPUs that I have. So this way, not only look dev goes way, way easier for me, because imagine from rendering some heavy depth of field sort or something with volumetrics, with 2 GPUs, suddenly you have 12 just in your live viewer like this. You are able to very quickly fine-tune the look you need to perfection very, very fast. So I think my experiment started working very well because as a single man, I could do work, let's say, of a small-scale studio throughout the years by following these principles and this workflow. And as an art director, from that part in time onwards, I started working for many big studios like Elastic, Framestore, MPC, ManVsMachine, among others. And for all the big tech clients, Google, Amazon, Apple, Netflix. And I started again downgrading in a way and focusing only on doing style frames. I didn't want to do animation much anymore because I thought that design is something that fits me better. And with my current workflow, I think this was very, very achievable because I could output many frames per day through the help of Octane, many iterations of many things. And this kept me going throughout this industry at its, let's say, highest level in a way. And with this and that, the last 1.5 years, I ended up being an art director, a freelance art director at Apple, working remotely from Greece. Unfortunately, I cannot ever speak about what I'm doing at Apple. Everything there is very, very confidential, but I'm sure you've seen some of my things somewhere in your devices, or I don't know. I can't speak anymore about it. I'm gonna dive into some more technical examples. That is a little bit of my life story, but why Octane? Why Octane is so dear to me and so unique to me? And I'm gonna explain some very simple concepts. So one thing that helped me changing from a very technical person to a more more of a designer, let's say, not artist, is the fact that Octane has 0 settings, right? As you see here, I'm changing some samples, and the samples in Octane is like when your image is clear. I don't have to do anything else. I don't have to do weird calculations, anti-aliasing. I don't have to worry about anything. As long as I see my image getting clear, this is the final result that I get. And this was super important because when I was doing heavy animation projects with V-Ray, I had to do a ton of test rendering and a ton of fine-tuning to correct errors. And this way, in Octane, you can just use you can render a part of your image, as you see here on the left side. This is called the render region. And when you use this render region and you see a part of your image clearing enough, it gives you a number here, which are the samples, and you say, oh, this is the final number that I need to put in my settings, and that's all you need to do. So nature of unbiased renders for me is, again, a standard thing these days. I don't think I would be able to go back into calculating samples and doing technical stuff. I really want to go to the essence of things, which is creating some nice frames rather than fiddling with technicalities. Another thing that is very useful for me as an art director is the ability. I know these are a little details sometimes, but here I can navigate inside the live viewer of Octane, which is really, really amazing. I can select areas where I do my focus. And as you see, this is a very heavy scene, right? It contains a lot of stuff. And this is me recording real time. I can grab materials from inside the scene, assign materials inside the live viewer. These things sound a little bit of, I don't know, not necessity sometimes, but trust me, there will be the project that you will be so overwhelmed by the object manager and what's going on inside cinema, and you would be like, I wish I could drop materials inside the live viewer. And yes, you can. You can just drop your materials in there and play God of Pixels or something. Another thing that I really loved about Octane from the get-go is how it handles light different. Any unbiased engine actually handles light different than other engines. And I always said to myself, I put sometimes a white plane and a sphere. I throw it daylight and I'm like, oh, how beautiful it looks. Just because the light bounces and the colors and everything are very, very nice. And as you see here, I'm using, Octane has different sky models. And I'm using here I think it's called Nisita sky model, this one, which is very, very good for ArcViz as well, for when you want to do things like golden hour, something that I'm trying to play here with. And I also like a lot the post-processing tools of Octane, the way it handles glows very naturally, the cutoff to select certain areas of your image that glow more than the others. And I think you start to see why I stopped doing compositing all of a sudden. I mean, I haven't stopped completely. Sometimes it's necessary to do certain parts in after your renderings, but overall, I say 90% of my images have zero comp at all. I try to nail all effects in camera, from motion blur, depth of field, close, and you know, let Octane handle the rest. One also major feature for me that was and still is revolutionary to these days is texture displacement. So for those who know what displacement is when you take an image and you distort the underlying geometry this way and make it have actual heights, etc. Something that you use a lot when you use megascans or when you do environments and stuff. And Octane has this mode called texture displacement, where it doesn't need to subdivide your objects in order to do that. It does it real time, as you see in the viewport, with again zero problems, as long as your object has UVs. It's not like for everything. You cannot do extremely experimental stuff with it, but especially for environment artists and for people that don't want to be very technical about it, this mode is extremely helpful. It loads immediately because it's based on textures and not based on your actual geometry. And it was something that made me add this realism to my images very, very quickly and with very much art directability, let's say. In the latest versions of Octane, we also have real-time caustics. Caustics is the way that the light bends when it enters a refractive object like glass. And in simple words, is this cute, nice shapes that you see here that comes out from the light. And this is also extremely important in some cases. Probably you won't use caustics on your day-to-day imagery, but how many times you have like a whiskey commercial or liquids or ice cubes or things like that, and there is where having the ability to art direct your caustics real time by moving light around or changing light material or adding dispersion, if you can see this real time, it's also extremely important, and it will save you hours of work instead of having, to send the render in the picture viewer of cinema or doing region stuff, or, By now you would probably realize that I hate everything that is not real time, and I try to make my work as easy as possible. So caustics and the ability of Octane to handle light, and this is an image by Rafael Rao. He's sitting right there. Give him a nice applause. He made this extremely pretty image utilizing the universal camera settings of Octane. Octane has multiple camera modes also that can be very photorealistic in terms of how it handles bokeh, motion blur, weird aberration stuff. I mean, if you're a geek about photography, definitely this is the place to go. And as you see also, handling glass in any render engine can be extremely challenging, and Octane just nails that out of the box. It's like everything looks extremely realistic, and probably he should be talking about art directing photorealism, not me. But yeah, glasses is also another reason why I really, really love Octane. And of course, subsurface scattering. Octane has multiple modes of subsurface scattering, and here is me. I do, by the way, a lot of food commercial, and Octane made me very, very comfortable with that because, as you see, real time changing from a cream to a caramel without much hassle, without clamped light inside the objects, without errors, being also extremely fast. It's something that helps you very, very much in the commercial work, right? And let's not forget that food commercials have a lot of budget. So it's very nice to have something like this in your arsenal. Octane also has a lot of utility nodes, right? And here's a very simplistic example. I have this very boring wood floor. And what I'm doing here is I can have a texture, I can offset the UVs of the texture. It's a little technical, but eventually you'll understand how nice this can be to have these small tricks in your sleeves. So after offsetting a little bit the same texture, I can jitter it, which means I can find every clone, because this is a cloner setup, find every instance, add a little bit of offset in hue or saturation or in brightness, in contrast, and add a little bit of dirt on top of it, again with offsetted the radius of the dirt. Yes, and by combining everything on top, you see that you just start having something way better than you had before, and obviously adding depth of field to everything just makes them look cool. Depth of field and flares, depth of field and flares. The same example, but in a more designy context. Again, very simple. I have a cloner here with some objects, and I'm just using some random color. This is another node of Octane, random color that works immediately on render instances without any MoGraph data. And then using again the jitter color node, which can take, you see, how nice I can shift the hue from oranges to a little more yellow and then mask this color. There are so many nodes, like OSL nodes. There are so many things that I haven't even discovered myself. But once you play around, you will see that there is so much control in the data that Octane can output, not only within Cinema 4D, but in all of the other DCC that I had the pleasure to work with. So this is again about me, and I want to say that all of these nice tricks and things that I showed you before are part of my night studies, because I want to present myself as an art director at day but tutor at night, because I run also a Patreon page with a lot of these tips, tricks, etc. And let me do some shameless self-promotion here with this small reel about it. A lot of work. Oof. Thank you. Thank you. And on top of my Patreon, and because I love Octane so much, I started also creating courses about Octane. This is the first one called Octane Fundamentals, and I explain in detail how I use Octane. It's not like a manual one-on-one about everything. It's the workflows and the tips and tricks that I use personally in order to achieve the images and the animations that I have. So this is my details, my social stuff, and yeah, thanks Otoy for having me, and thank you very much for being here today.